To the All Committees meeting, special called All Committees meeting for November 18th, 2024. The elected body president, Mayor Kurt Wilson, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Alan Sells, Councilmember David Johnson, Councilmember Sarah Beeson, Councilmember G. Lee Hills, Councilmember William Morthland. I'm Randy Knighton, the city administrator, joined with David Davidson, the city attorney, and Michelle Miller, deputy city clerk. The purpose of committee meetings are for city departments to convey information which do appear on the published agenda to the mayor and council. And by ordinance, the committee consists of mayor and council as well as the city administrator. And this is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, there will not be any public comments or questions taken unless specifically authorized by mayor and council. Public comments and questions are received at our regular city council meetings on the second and fourth Monday and any other special called meetings, as well as the fifth Monday of each month in open forum. We do encourage all of our residents to engage our online platforms to reach out to our staff and team members if you have questions or need information. We also encourage everyone to visit Roswell365.com for a calendar of events and our web service portal to report any issues or concerns. The first item on the agenda for this evening is a singular item on the agenda under administration, item number 1, consideration of a resolution instituting a temporary moratorium on murals in the city of Roswell. Mr. Davidson. Mr. Davidson.
Thank you. There's been some discussion about murals in areas of the city. We have an ordinance currently in place that does not allow a picture, symbol, or device of any kind that relates to the commercial business where it's at. There's currently a case heading up to the Supreme Court that we wanted to look at to make sure that our ordinance would still be valid. This is in our sign ordinance, so it's very touchy. So we like to stay up to date as soon as possible on those matters. This would give us time to look at both sides of the arguments that are going up to the Supreme Court and hopefully go ahead and take action if need be.
All right, thank you, Mr. Davidson. Do we have any questions, comments? Yes, Councilmember Hills, Mayor Wilson? Yes. Yes.
Is it the intent that after you have time to reflect, that a new ordinance, information will be gathered, and then a new ordinance will be written by council?
If necessary, yes.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Lee.
Councilmember Hills.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Knighton. I brought this forward mainly because I'm concerned about the historic district and what we're doing while we're doing a lot of excellent development, in my opinion. I believe that we have in a lot of our areas what's referred to sometimes in the industry of design, visual smog. And so I'm concerned about adding anything more in our historic district that could break down the nature, character of that area. And I'd like to have the 90 days, it may not take that long, to really reevaluate what we're doing in the historic district and then have some conversations beyond the historic district itself, like what we might want to do with some of the other development that this mayor and council is working on. I think we have a prime opportunity to get some things really right in the way of public art and to deter from things that go really wrong and do not add value to the economy or to the areas. So that was my intention, and I just would ask this body that we grant a 90-day moratorium so that we can work on that. I'm happy to meet with anybody, talk with, bring in, but I would like to work very hard on that to get everybody some information over the next couple of months to work on ironing that out.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Hills. Councilmember Beeson?
There seems to be a conflict, just from what I'm hearing, between two sides here. First, my understanding, as we discussed initially in last week's council meeting and regular meeting. We've been in so many meetings, I barely know what day it is. One of the meetings we were in last week, when this got deferred to this meeting, that was the impetus, was that there were Supreme Court cases that we needed to look at, to which that begged the question to me, why would we want to make changes to a code before a Supreme Court ruling as opposed to waiting for the ruling and then letting that guide our policy decisions? However, now I'm understanding that Councilmember Hills, you wanted to bring this item forward to avoid, I'm going to use your words, prevent visual smog in the historic district.
That's one thing, yeah.
So is it a legality or a legality? What's the impetus behind this decision of bringing this forward for a moratorium and then potential policy changes?
All right. Councilmember Hall.
Can't we solve both things? I mean, isn't that the purpose, that there were two issues and they just happened, the Supreme Court case, and this conversation's been going on for a year and a half. So, does it matter? We get to knock out two birds with one stone.
Councilmember Beeson.
Well, yeah, because the Supreme Court hasn't ruled yet, according to the city attorney, David Davidson. You can't make a policy change based off a Supreme Court ruling if the Supreme Court hasn't ruled yet. That said, there's been several district court cases, all of which side with the property owner. Their First Amendment protected right to be able to paint. And keep in mind, too, that our city code itself, and I realize that it could be on the line with the Supreme Court rulings, follow with these cases that we as a government entity cannot dictate to a private property owner what can and cannot be painted on the side of their building, with the exception of, say, pornography or something incredibly offensive, because it violates their First Amendment rights to free speech. I understand the justification for why we would want to maybe revisit our policy, because currently our policy says it cannot be on a residential building, says that it can't be an advertisement, it says that there's 5 standards that we Five, look at me go. 5 standards that we currently uphold within our Unified Development Code that guide murals. And I could understand how we might actually want to walk those back based off the way the Supreme Court could be hearing this case. It's already failed all the way up to the Supreme Court, and that the property owner has always been consistently sided with. However, I'm hearing your guidance and your recommendations to the elected body that we would rather add more guidances or try to have some level of oversight as to what is put into the historic district or anywhere in the city. That is the exact opposite of the trend that any case law that we have so far would go. So I'm not quite understanding why we would want a moratorium, and then secondarily, what changes we're proposing to make within the guise of that moratorium.
Councilmember Sells.
I'll play junior lawyer. I would not say that a moratorium is necessarily adding legislation per se. We are simply saying that status quo holds for the time for the review. Is that a fair?
That's 100% accurate.
Okay. The second thing, for those, I'll be uber nerd for a second, and I'm sorry, I haven't looked at the Supreme Court case, but can you tell us what the 5 things that our ordinance does and which one you think is impinged by this Supreme Court case?
So the very last one says that any mural cannot contain a picture, symbol, or device of any kind that relates to a commercial business, product, or service offered at the premises where the wall is located. So the one that's going up to the Supreme Court right now is donuts at a donut shop.
And the lower courts have held how?
For the property owner. For the donuts.
I like donuts.
Okay, all right. Further question? Yes, Councilmember Johnson.
So the donut shop has one, right, the property owner,
Up to SCOTUS.
so far. What would we change to ours that would, like, that would allow, so we would essentially say you can paint a donut if you have a donut shop, or if you have a tire shop, or,
We might have to take that section out. Now, there are other ways to attack the problem, which the 90 days would also possibly allow us to do, such that a mural could be considered advertising for our purposes, and that whoever has a mural couldn't have another sign.
is there someone who wants to paint a mural at our historic district or in our city currently that would be in violation of our code? Like, has someone submitted plans or something like that?
There's no permit required for a mural.
Okay, so we don't know. So tomorrow, if I own a tire shop, I can go paint a tire on the side of my building.
Now's the time.
And
Well, they would be in violation.
right, but then
Right.
Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I made a conscious decision not to go to law school 40 years ago for good reason. And don't, that's right. I don't want to get into a very deep conversation about the law, but I do want to ask our city attorney, who represents the city as our chief legal officer, are you recommending that we take a 90-day moratorium?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Further comments or questions? Councilmember Beeson.
Could you clarify the yes for why we do a 90-day moratorium when I know Supreme Court decisions aren't going to come out for another 90 days? They're typically heard in spring and summer.
So the 90 days just maintains the status quo. It doesn't hurt anybody. It's a 3-month time where we can go look, study it more in depth, and if we need to, come up with answers or come up with taking stuff out of the ordinance that's in there that could get us in trouble later on.
And the justification, again, I'm just not understanding the conflict. You said that you put the item on the agenda. You're telling me the justification for the moratorium is because we need to study what is happening. It's Schrodinger's wall mural at this point. We don't know if they're going to win the case or lose the case at the Supreme Court. So I don't understand the impetus for pausing on something when we have no idea how it's going to play out at the highest court. At the same time, what was just originally said was this was added by a council member because they want to make policy changes to raise the threshold of what approvals would go into wall murals. So which is it?
Well, I'm not sure that's what she said, but I think she just wanted to look at it and have more discussions about it. And so the 90 days would also allow y'all to have discussions amongst yourselves if you wanted, and with the public. And it would give me time to do more research, because I really honestly haven't looked at the other cases. The donut one is the main one that I've seen.
Understood. And then I guess my last question is the justification behind moratoriums is typically health, welfare, and the public safety aspect of the entire city. I'm baffled as to how a wall mural could be negative towards health, welfare, public safety. In fact, numerous studies have showed that wall murals improve each of those things. Even economic development, which was the justification, is not for some reason in this item. I don't know why the resolution or the language of the resolution is not included. Oh, here it is. It's at the very back. So the way that it's phrased in the resolution is that it may add to the aesthetic beauty of the city to promote economic development. It also may deter from the aesthetic beauty from the city and hinder economic development activities. There have been numerous studies that have shown consistently that wall murals are positive towards economic development, have never actually proven to be negative towards them, with the exception of graffiti, which in this case isn't a public mural, and that it's immediate interest to the citizens of Roswell and concern to health, safety, and welfare of the public to maintain status quo, to provide the appropriate regulations of murals. It also said in here, oh, did we take the language out about how it could be distracting to drivers? That one was my favorite. That was a nice touch because I've never heard that in my life. And in fact, there have been studies that showed it's actually much safer for drivers to be able to have wall murals because people slow down because they want to appreciate it. I don't understand why we need to have a moratorium on something that is someone's potential First Amendment right and is otherwise regulated within the city, as long as they don't meet those exceptions. Instead of saying, okay, we're taking a pause because we need to add additional regulations. In this situation, we would be taking a pause to see if we'd actually need to remove regulations based off the Supreme Court case and what's pending. So what is the justification for a 90-day moratorium if we're not going to get a response?
So it simply maintains the status quo. It's not a prohibition in any form or fashion. It just maintains the status quo for the 90 days, and that gives us time to do the prep that we need to do if we are going to take it out, or if we're going to add other things in that might be legal.
You said status quo. You said it's not a ban on them? So people could still put a mural on their private property as long as it's commercial?
So what the moratorium would do would just prevent it for 90 days, which is not a ban. It's been determined by the Supreme Court several times that a moratorium is not a ban. It's just a temporary, maintain the status quo until that 90 days is over.
But how would you do that if it's not a permitted process?
So in some areas, it is a permitted process. So like paint color is regulated by DRB. Paint color is not regulated in the historic district.
So in which instance, because obviously before we don't have a permitting process for the wall murals, so how would it come forward to us that would hit a moratorium?
So if somebody is building a building, DRB gets to look at it and they get to tell them the materials and the colors they can use. The only place that doesn't exist by state law is in the historic district.
Okay, and then would the historic district still have the moratorium as well?
It's a general moratorium, just because it's dealing with the whole UDC mural definitions. And so, yeah, it would apply everywhere for now.
Councilmember Sells?
First, Schrodinger's mural cat is still dead, just saying.
It's not advertised.
So I'm more confused now, I'm sorry, but in the historic district, can someone paint a mural, or is it precluded completely today?
So the city is not authorized under state law to regulate paint colors. So somebody could paint anything.
In historic districts, or?
In any historic district throughout the state.
Okay, but we can everywhere else?
Yes.
And so, okay, so we can require that murals not be painted anywhere except in the historic district today?
Correct.
And
Now that's, again, could be
subject to the
subject
Supreme
challenge,
Court?
right?
Yeah, I get that. I have a follow-up question that just escapes me at the moment. I'll probably.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson?
You said a moratorium by the Supreme Court. It's not a ban. This would not be a violation of the First Amendment rights.
Correct.
However, I do feel like that we are getting into, I don't know how to put this except simple language, HOA territory. You know, I'm just not comfortable with a moratorium on this, especially knowing that we could be changing ordinances in 6 months. June, typically when the Supreme Court releases the case.
Sometime during the summer, yeah.
Summer, yeah, June, July. I don't know. I feel like we're getting down into the weeds of something that with all the stuff that we have going on in this city is minutiae. Whereas, we have big economic development projects we want to bring to this city, and I don't know. This just seems so minor to me that we would have a special call meeting about it. And yeah, that's my 2 cents. I'll probably be voting against the moratorium.
Mayor Wilson?
If a moratorium would go through committee and go to council and get passed, who's going to be working on this during that 90-day period?
I would be working on the ordinance portion, but then as far as the discussions, that would be amongst y'all, mayor and council.
Mr. Chairman, have you discussed this at all or looked at this and who might be working on this?
I have not.
I mean, just off the, I haven't spent any time on this, I think, at all. But I will say, first of all, for me, if the guidance comes from my city attorney, our city attorney, for me, that's kind of like a precedence piece. Like, okay, so the city attorney wants us to pay attention to something and say, look, I'm not telling you that it goes away forever. I just want you to put a 90-day moratorium on it. Listen, okay. Is there true damage to come from that? And I'd probably say probably not, particularly if our legal expert who represents the best interest of the city says that. To me, that seems logical. I think what I would probably request out of that process is, and before I get into too deep of a rabbit hole and too many pieces on this, is certainly I'd like a process that obviously if the city attorney's working on this from a legal perspective, Mr. Chairman, I certainly would like some guidance along with perhaps council members Beeson, Councilmember Hills, perhaps Community Development Director Michelle, among others, perhaps be involved on whatever pieces they want to work on this piece, that there's a plan for the 90 days. Because I would, from my judgment, I would defer to the judgment of the city attorney if he's requesting a 90-day moratorium, unless I have a huge ideological or philosophical opposition to that. But I would request that there's a plan for what we do during those 90 days if this were to get passed out of committee and were to get to pass off the dais at a mayor and council meeting, that there's a plan for what occurs during those 90 days.
Councilmember Sells?
So Mayor, what you're saying is there's actually two problems here. There's two questions, right? One is David's got some wood to chop with regard to I'm not clear yet on, can you limit, for instance, graffiti? It sounds like you can, but there's some stuff here that we need to think about that may be at hand for us. And I completely agree with you on that. And the second thing you're saying is that whoever is interested in this issue should chop the wood on that side.
I think there's some
to
good
do
debate to
what-
be
yeah.
had. Exactly, yeah.
'Cause that would be great if y'all could hash that out and tell us what we need to do.
Councilmember Beeson?
I love chopping wood as much as the next girl. I just don't understand how we can begin chopping said policy wood if we don't have the guidance of the highest court yet, because how it decides the case completely determines how we as an elected body create a policy to guide the city. So say, for instance, I run 100 miles in a direction, or Councilmember Hills or anybody at this table runs 100 miles in one direction and the Supreme Court decides the other way, either it was wasted time or we're going to spend that time having to unwind that. So can we instead table this until the Supreme Court decides and then revisit this at that time? That to me seems like a more natural option. Furthermore, I don't understand the rush on this. The conversation that we had during the last council meeting, again, it's a blur. I don't remember which council meeting it was. I think it was last Monday. It was like, hurry up, guys. We gotta decide the Supreme Court case. I thought the ruling had already happened. But the fact that the Supreme Court is taking up the case and has not made a determination yet, I don't understand how we can land the plane on a policy if the policy hasn't been dictated by the highest court yet.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councilmember Johnson?
I just want to say I concur with Sarah on that. I'd rather wait to see what the Supreme Court tells us to do. Because honestly, I'm not really against a donut shop having donuts on the side of their wall. You know, I like donuts and painted on the side of the wall, and I think that's great for their business. So I might be against what our current ordinance says. You know, now that I've researched it or looked into this a little bit more, so now I'm all confused, and I really didn't even care about murals until like a week ago. So.
All right. Further questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion.
Motion to move this forward to
Motion by
council.
Councilmember Hills,
Second.
second by Councilmember Hall. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor. All opposed? And 2 opposed. 5 in favor, 2 opposed. Assuming this will be going to our next council meeting on the 25th. All right. November, it's a regular council meeting on the 25th. All right. That does conclude the special called committee meeting for this evening. We'll entertain a motion of adjournment. Motion by Councilmember Beeson, second by Councilmember Johnson. All in favor? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much.